Job Insights is a podcast that is helping you find careers and gainful employment through innovations and opportunities. And you can find the Job Insights podcast on blindabilities.com, part of the Blind Abilities Network. And as part of the Job Insights podcast, we will be bringing you the Job Insights Extras, consisting of interviews, demonstrations, and news surrounding employment, careers, and jobs, with hosts Serina, Gilbert, and myself, Jeff Thompson. And you can contact us by email at jobinsights@blindabilities.com. Leave us some feedback or suggest some topics that we cover on Twitter at JobInsightsVIP. Welcome to a Job Insights Extra, and today I want to share with you some job insights that came from Jack Chen, Dan Berlin, and Tina Ament. They're 3/4 of the team of Team C2C, and they're entering the Race Across America this summer. And some of the feats these three have been in is quite astonishing. From climbing Kilimanjaro to racing in ultra marathons, world champion hill climber, Google lawyer, a U.S. attorney, co-founder of a major food company. The list goes on. And be sure to check out the podcast with Team C2C, Race Across America. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you'll learn so much more about each of these individuals and the feats that they've accomplished. And while I had them in the studio, I asked them some questions about transition age students and employment. And I really appreciate them taking the time to answer these questions and being willing to share their experiences and advice with us. So please welcome Jack Chen, Dan Berlin, and Tina Ament on transitioning students and employment. So while we're here, I want to take this opportunity to ask you a couple questions about transition and employment and some words of advice. Tina, what advice would you have for someone who is transitioning from high school to college to the workplace and has their job sights on employment?
Be your own best advocate. I think that the hard thing about leaving high school is, and then about leaving the education environment and going into the work environment, is that the older you get, the less built-in support systems you're going to have. So my advice would be to learn early on how to advocate for yourself and how to dispel people's assumptions about you. When I started at my law firm out of law school, there had been another blind attorney who worked there before me, and he had left to go and teach. And I started maybe 6 months after he did, and I got put in the same office as he had been. And I remember one of the partners coming in and saying, "Don't let this firm decide that you are Max. You're not Max, you're you." And not that Max wasn't a great guy and had a lot of, great talents and nothing against him, but you have to overcome people's assumptions that either they know what's best for you or whatever some other blind person did is what you do. So I would say learn how to self-advocate and learn how to recognize people's assumptions for what they are, because sometimes you won't necessarily see them unless you're on the lookout for it.
That's a great point. How about you, Jack?
One of the things that's absolutely key is to find people who have done this thing, whatever it is that you're doing before you, if that's possible. And one of the great things that I've also been involved with is creating a network of people who have incredible talents, who have disabilities. It's called Lime Connect. And its motto is to rebrand disability through achievement. And one of the great things about this organization is there are 10,000 plus other people out there who have disabilities who are doing what you're doing and who can act as a resource. And, when you go to your first job interview and they ask you a question that you don't know how to answer, like, for example, they come to you and say, "Hey, well, how are you going to draw this drawing?" Well, you go back to your network and you say, "Hey, guys, anyone else face this issue? How did you deal with it?" And just being empowered by having this resource is incredibly valuable, I think. I know I didn't have that when I was growing up. Sounds like Tina didn't have that when she was growing up. But now there are resources available just, by the quote-unquote click of a mouse. You can find people who are similarly situated with you or people who've gone before you. So finding those individuals who know what you're going through and can help give you some advice and some support along the way, their resources are out there. So go find it.
Dan, I know these are two tough people to follow, but you want to give it a shot?
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, sure. I mean, I have a little bit different perspective too, because I lost my vision a little later in life. So I was into my career and working hard at it. I hid it for years, kind of that fake it till you make it mentality. And then I had an epiphany at one point. I had this whole change in attitude that was so great for me. And the advice I would give to someone is to be yourself. just be comfortable in your own skin. At the end of the day, you are who you are, and nobody can change that. The second thing is, with that in mind, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need some help, if you need to tap into your resources, if you need to ask somebody, hey, can you tell me where this is? Don't be afraid to ask. The third thing is use the limitation as your advantage. One of the things that, whether we like it or not, and it's just what Tina was alluding to here, is the standards are set lower for people with disabilities. So not that we do not have to live up to these standards, but that's our benchmark now. So it gives us the opportunity to achieve above and beyond these standards. So look at this as an opportunity that the shackles are off, my expectations are low on what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to blow it out of the water because my downside of being wrong is quite minimal. So take advantage of that. Just go for it.
I would sort of add to that. I think the one thing that sometimes, I let floor me or discourage me is that, as I said before, people are always making assumptions about you. And the first thing they're going to make an assumption based on is that you're blind or differently abled. And so much of the time, you don't know how many times I get onto public transit and somebody says, do you know what stop you're going to? As though I would get my fare card, dress up in work clothes, and get on the train having no idea what stop I wanted to go to. So it's sort of like half the world assumes that you're feeble-minded, and then a quarter of the world assumes that you're some sort of superhuman, like you must have Steve Austin Bionic Man hearing and a computer chip implant for a memory because you actually get up and function in the world. So a lot of the time, I just have to remind myself not to let either of those assumptions, or people say like, oh, well, you're just so much more dogged and determined because you do your sports. It's like, well, no, I'm not a Superman. I'm not a bionic woman. I don't have a Harry Potter time turner so I can do twice as much training as anybody. I'm just a person who doesn't see. And so when you strip away a lot of the assumptions, you have to remind yourself, like, I'm not as great as some of them think I am, and I'm not feeble-minded as some of them think I am. But you have to, I think, really look to your own self to try to decide where your self-worth comes from, because assumptions that a lot of people make about you are so bogus and so out of hand that if you listen to them, you'll drive yourself crazy.
To put that into perspective too, in our modern capitalistic business world here too, I would love nothing better than all my competition to underestimate what we as a company are capable of doing. And then you get out there and you just outperform it. It's one of the classic mistakes that people make, in life and in business too. And it's one of those things where we, again, can turn the disability, we can turn the perceptions others have of us into a positive.
That's great. Turn it into a positive. Dan, there's a topic that you brought up, and it's about people not knowing what they can't do, something of that nature. Can you explain what you meant when you said that?
Yeah, it's so true in human our existence. And so often, none of us know what we can't do. We all know what we think we can't do. But until you put it out there and actually try it, actually go for it, we really don't know what our limits are. And so often what we're pushing up against as blind individuals just happen to have it highlighted more than others. But this is universal. We're pushing up against our perceived limitations. That's something that all of us can challenge. That's why this message can be universal, beyond blindness, beyond disability. We catch a lot of attention because we're a cyclist who is blind or a runner who is blind has done X, Y, Z. And I hear the comments all the time from folks that say, I can't believe you ran the marathon. I can't believe you did an Ironman. I could never do that. And that label right there, it's like, no, you probably could do it. It would need a lot of work. And we tend to limit ourselves quite a bit right there. And it's so freeing to have those limitations removed. Just that idea that we really can do whatever we want to do. It's just where we're going to focus and what effort we're going to put into it. So attitude, effort, and discipline is really what it all comes down to.
And I think that's a really important point, Jeff, to drive home, is that a lot of people count themselves out before they even get started, right? They ask the question, can I, right? But they don't say I can. And so I think that for all of us, I think I would say where our blindness started, our lives really began. And what I mean by that is it's easy for folks, and this is not just cyclists, of course, but for anybody to have something significant happen to them in their lives or to be treated in a particular way. A fifth grade teacher told me very specifically that, you don't have to work so hard. Government's going to take care of you. Don't stress out. Don't work so hard in school. Because I was a kid who I really wanted to do well when I was younger, and I struggled. And so the mentality sometimes sets in that, well, I do have certain limitations and I should really count the costs. And for me, I've come to the point now where I say, well, rather than thinking first about whether I can do something, I say, how can I do it? So it's not can I, but how can I? And that extra word adds an incredible amount of power and success in one's life. And that's kind of one of the things that we want to communicate.
Well put, very well put, Jack. Tina, being that you lost your eyesight early on, how did you overcome the obstacles that you faced?
Well, to some extent, with a lot of help, a lot of support from family. I grew up in the days when my parents fought to get my sister and me into public school. And we sort of fought for every, between them and us individually, we fought for every little thing. And on the be careful what you wish for side, there was a lot of bullying. Back then, teachers didn't care if kids picked on us. There was no stigma attached to bullying or any of that. So a lot of it was between that and being military kids who had to move all the time. You just had to learn how to jump in and swim, essentially. I think having sports and activities was a way to belong. And I can remember when I was in fourth grade, and I had a little bit more vision than I do now, being forced into gym class. And the day that we were doing soccer drills, and I actually saved a goal, and the class cheered for me, was, one of the greatest days of my life. I mean, who remembers a silly PE class in fourth grade? But I do, because sports was a way to belong with my sighted peers. And I think it's so important for anybody with a disability or to have the chance to fit in, because it's such a big part of growing up in the States. And, sports, music, all these kind of activities that kids do. My parents and my sister and I both, we had to push ourselves to get off the sidelines and be able to do something to belong. So I think, doing sports for me, I'm a very competitive person. So like Jack, I always wanted to do well in school and was sort of, very self-motivated to do well, but it was hard. And you did have to deal with low expectations, because a lot of teachers and people didn't expect much of you. And, you had to find it within yourself to decide, hey, I'm going to go for what I think is important, because, nobody's going to tell me.
Such a great opportunity to talk to Jack, Dan, and Tina. Team C2C in the Race Across America this summer. That's RAM, Race Across America. We'll be covering it. Stay tuned. And it's such a great thing that they shared such great advice, such transferable advice. It's not just for school, not for employment, but life itself that they shared with us today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Job Insights Extra. And be sure to check out Job Insights on the Blind Abilities Network. We hope you enjoyed. And until next time, bye-bye.
When we share
what we see through each other's eyes,
we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the realities of blind abilities.
The realities of blind
abilities.
For more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter at blindabilities. Download our app from the App Store, blindabilities, that's 2 words, or send us an email at info@blindabilities.com. Thanks for listening.